special needs parenting journey. We're looking at why there are so few male voices in the conversation. It just has piqued my interest. So let's get stuck in and get to know my co-hosts today. Who am I going to put on the spot first? I think I'm going to go from the far end. So we're going to meet Obina Okerikiocha. Obina, can you tell us a little about who you are, what you do, and about your child's diagnosis?
So thanks everyone. My name is Obina Okerikiocha. I mean lots of things, but let me just say that I'm an artist, a filmmaker, music composer, music director, and I've pretty much been working in the creative space for over about 20 years now. So at the moment, I work with Money Point as the director of content. So I think to answer the question, when he was born, it wasn't something that was very apparent, until about a couple of months we started to notice that he wasn't developing well, and he seemed to have labored breathing. And at that point, we said, okay, we need to take him to, have a second look and see what's happening. And that process took a while, just to get the appointment, to sort of figure out what was going on. And when we eventually did, they said, oh, okay, he has a hole in his heart and he needs to get surgery as soon as possible. So that sort of rocked our boats, this is like barely some months after he was born, almost a year. So we, of course, started to make plans. Thankfully, the country was not the way it was at the time. So it was quickly, we were able to quickly put funds together, change FX, etc. And we jetted out to India. And the procedure lasted for so we landed on it like a Tuesday. By Wednesday, it was moving to theater. It was done. So it took about 14 days of recovery. And within that time, the doctor now said, okay, done it, sorted out the holes and all that, but we need to let you know that he has a condition. And that's where we sort of figured out, when we were told firsthand that he had Down syndrome.
So you had the diagnosis of the heart first,
exactly,
before the Down syndrome.
Exactly.
But did they know about the Down syndrome and just didn't tell you? Because Down syndrome it presents.
So it wasn't really visible when he was. It wasn't really visible, when he was born, because it's not a mosaic. It's not like a really obvious one where you see the kid or you know clearly, the certain abnormalities or things that are not in place. But for this one, he wasn't showing anything. But when he started to show this, delayed developments, and we said something that is not quite right, we need to check, and so that process really revealed the fact that this is the real situation of things. So yeah.
So we're still getting to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
How, thinking about who you are as a father, right? And he's your first child.
Yes.
So this was your journey into parenting.
Exactly.
How did that affect you as a man?
So first of all, I know that because I have a mother who's very, because she's worked in public health, so she's very, she picks up these things very, she can say, okay, just by looking or by, it's okay. So she would say, check. This was before, obviously, we went to do the hands procedure and all that, but I was like, no, nothing can be wrong with us. It can't be any insinuations or anything like, no, nothing can be wrong. So I wouldn't say denial, but I was so sure that nothing of the sort was wrong with him. But when we eventually got it, it was a big blow because it's the last thing you expect, because first child, the first son, his first child, there's always that, this is the child that brings all the great things and all of it, especially, and I'm from the eastern part of the country, so it's a big thing, Now, how do you reconcile that with this new information? And I think what really struck me beyond even me is the very moment that the news was broken to us, and it was done in such a careless, wanton, insensitive manner. The lady goes, oh, he has a glowing heart, and my wife just broke down, complete. So here we were in the this hospital and crying and holding each other, you know. So it was part of a, you know, a very, very, you know, a very serious moment, something I cannot forget, something that makes quite an impression on me. So yeah, so it was, you know, so I was like, okay, you know, I have to forget myself now and be there for my family, be there for my wife, to see this through now. So I had no time to think about myself. Let me put it that way. I had to be there, be strong, and just, you know, see everybody through this dark time, right? Just so yeah.
So, if you're listening, you can understand that, and you can hear it's a difficult journey, and it's hard to reconcile with who you're meant to be as a man, right?
Absolutely.
What the culture says you're meant to be. So, we're going to meet another host who is trying to do, as I'm not going to pick you, but I'm going to pick you. Paul Okewu. Please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and tell us something about your child who has a diagnosis.
My name is Paul. I am what you call a sales guy. I think that's the best way to describe myself because I sell many things. You know, everyone lives by selling something. So I sell music through my company Chocolate City. I've sold everything from phones to cigarettes. Working for many multinationals, you know, Microsoft, Nokia, travel around selling a lot, which is important because I've never been in one place. I think this is the first time in my life where I'm really steady, staying in one place. I mean, usually I was always on the road doing one thing or the other. So that's pretty much best description. My son Caesar, he's 14 now, and he has autism. He's on the spectrum, and I think for us, we realized quite early, and I think also because I wasn't at home a lot. I would travel for work, and my family would be at home. And he's my second child, my first son, so I totally get the whole Igbo thing. You know, we know what that is. So my second child, my first son. So because I would be away, I think I'd come home. Probably I was a little more. I would notice things a little more because, like, when you come home and your son sees you, he runs towards you, and there was none of that behavior, which was quite weird for me. And at first we thought he was deaf because. I would call him, he wouldn't respond, and then he'd be backing me, and then, you know, wouldn't respond. So I was sure that it was a deafness issue that we had. And so immediately, of course, I threw myself into, like most men do, threw myself into solution mode, which is, you know, I flew him out to a deaf and whatever training, did the testing. This kid is not deaf. I used to do something that I find silly now. Like, so I would come behind him with 2 pans.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
No.
My wife would say, she'll tell you. You know, he'd be watching. I'll come and stand behind him, and then I'll bang the pans together to see if he would react. But he never did, which was quite scary, right? We shot his name. So, you know, my wife said, look, there's something else going on. I think it was about 3 years old then, 2 or 3 years old. I'm not sure the date. And that's how we got into the Emory. Of course, before we went to Emory in Atlanta, we sort of knew because internet, you know, we were researching them, and this is autism. He had all the symptoms, you know, walking on the toes, you know, steaming, things like that. So we thought, look, this is probably autism, but and so we got a proper diagnosis from the doctor at Emory, which is an autism center in Atlanta. I think we were lucky to be able to have the means to spend some time there, because as you know, a lot of families, you know, in Africa, you know, can't afford to do that because it's quite expensive, you know. But yeah, so we got that diagnosis, and we've been managing ever since. He's 14 years old now. Amazing young man. He's an artist. Has had lots of exhibitions in Lagos. Sold a lot of paintings. I mean, he makes his own money now, which is great, and a big relief for me. But how did that make me feel as a man? This is like a very complicated question because first of all, it's not sort of how is a man supposed to feel in the first place? Like these days people don't know what a man is anymore. But
That's a whole other
that's a
topic.
whole other but for me, it was like I'll start with the cultural side, just like you were saying. There are many things that one had planned for their first son as a man. Like many plans I had in my head that I would be able to do with my boy, like teach him how to drive and how to chase girls and just generally take him for soccer. And when you have a son, he's like almost like your best friend, right? Especially when he's much younger, when he's younger until he grows up and goes away. So the first thing when I realized that I couldn't have that, of course there was heartbreak. Like I went through a lot of depression over this thing for quite a while. It took me a while to accept it. I had these, you would not know by sort of looking at me, but I had these fits of, crying. I would lock my room and I wouldn't let my other, because I had a daughter, my older child is a girl, and I didn't want her to see me in despair, my wife as well, because that's not a good look.
That's what it is. It's
you have to be
despair.
man. So like I would have this time when I would lock myself in my room and just cry for hours and pray, and I'm like, what the hell is this now? And it was because my son was non-verbal for quite a while. I mean, now he has a few words, 100 words or so, but before, like, he wouldn't say anything. Like, I hadn't heard him say daddy for the first, I would say 7 years of his life. Like, he didn't say a word. And so, of course, the first time he learned how to say daddy, again, was quite emotional for me. It was like a big sort of like achievement for us. So culturally, it was quite difficult because of where we come from, the expectations. I think as a man, to be honest, financially, because like it's a whole different thing, raising a child who has special needs in Nigeria, right? The costs are double, sometimes triple, everything. I mean, for example, a kid on autism, the diet alone, we couldn't feed him like everyday food. We had to go on this gluten-free stuff, casein-free, everything free. And Nigeria, we had so at the time we had to ship in food from the UK because they have really like free from because then if you can't eat gluten and you can't eat casein or carbs, he's dead now in Nigeria because Nigeria we already have carbs, right? So we have to there's a lot of money, and then for the school it was also difficult because you have to pay not only the school fees, but then you have to pay for a shadow. We had 3 therapists at some time coming through the house, and when you wanted to do art, you had to have an art teacher. So there's a lot of staff that are involved with just raising this one child. So, and that's quite a lot from a financial point of view. And I think for me, the biggest impact, I would say, as a father was how it began to affect my daughter, who's older. And because they're not very far in age, I think it's just about a year and some, I was very close to my daughter. Like when she was young, we were like inseparable. And we had this bond. Because when my son came, as is normal, a lot of attention went to the boy. Because, of course, not his fault because he needs it. But then at some point, you forget that there's another child who you're not spending as much time as. So my daughter had that. She had that period where she felt. I know for a child, we don't understand that this kid had autism, so it's not you. So she had that period where she felt, that we were a bit distant, and I think, but luckily for us, she expressed those. We were on a thing with Titi Bank, and we were on that with her, and she was asked the question, and we didn't even know this. Like she was asked the question, what does it feel like to be the sibling of an autistic, person? And my daughter is quite. She can talk. She's like. She's like. She knows how to talk, and she was very articulate in saying, "I felt abandoned. I felt like, you guys didn't have time for me. I felt like all your effort goes into Caesar, and that was really heartbreaking for me. Like, how do we fix that? Because then she was already. My fear was that feeling was already set. And how
do you change
how
that?
do you change that? So I mean, there's a lot more that I could say, but I think those three, culturally, financially, and even how it impacted my other children. We have a, even I'll share something. Even we have a third child now who is, I would say, 10 years. 10 years. How much older?
With Ziza or Zara?
Thank God your wife is here.
I will laugh.
With Ziza or between him and Ziza?
Between Ziza and Sia is
8 years.
8 years, right? So we had another child, and the motivation was we didn't want Ziza to be a last child. So like we had a plan, 2 kids and we're done. But then we said, you know what, we can't have him be a last child because we want to put him sandwiched in between 2 people who will love him by force. Because the thing is, when you go, which you eventually will, you cannot trust anyone to take care of your.
Yep.
You have to be blood. So we said let's put him between blood so that So there's a lot of impact that one can share. But yeah, these are the key ones for me.
That's really, you packaged so many things that we're actually going to talk about. But first, our last co-host we're going to introduce you to is Remy Olutomain. And he's a little different because he is the one with the diagnosis.
Yeah.
He has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And so we'd like to know who you are, Remy, and a little bit about your life, your family, your children, and how you navigate life with your diagnosis. And frankly, in my opinion, you're excelling at life with this diagnosis. So please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are.
So my name is Remy Olutomain. I'm a voice director for animation. I've been a voice actor, writer, producer for about 20 years. I'm so sorry. As Paul was talking, there's a lot that suddenly just made sense. Remember my dad. I remember the times he would be in a very dark mood. I was my 5th form King's College, and he just expressed out of nowhere that, if something happens to me, I don't know what will happen to this family. I don't think you can carry it. And I didn't even know where that question came up. It was like, I just
saw it.
The way I pictured it, or the way I framed it in my head, every time those thoughts come to mind, is that sons judge their fathers until they understand them.
100%.
So you just be like,
100%.
Sorry, can you say that again? Because that was just
Very
knowledgeable.
good. Yeah.
so sons judge their fathers until they understand them. Yeah. So the thing is, I just need to be clear about something. I'm yet to get a diagnosis because right now I'm going to be 45 this month. Thank you. And most of my attempts have been, as in to get a diagnosis, have had a cultural backlash.
Always start with the land acknowledgement.
So
As in,
please tell us about that cultural backlash.
So it's the last time I tried to get on the road to a diagnosis, I was given a form that offended me.
Is that here
Oh, yeah.
in Nigeria?
Yes, it offended me. And the thing is, I had already prepared myself that, I'm not going to put the mask down, I'm just going to, whatever it is they ask of me, let me just, because the mask is heavy.
Right, so in the masking, you're putting on this culturally acceptable
They're
mask
just-
to be able to navigate the day-to-day life, so you don't have to deal with everybody's
As in, like, I just have to swallow my disagreements. As in, it just, that's like, it's just like a massive thing, but I just have to swallow my disagreements, you get, and put on the face of an ally until everything is done. Then I can go home and recover.
Yeah.
So you filled out the form, which offended you?
Yeah, as in, they were asking things that I had cycled through when I was 14. As in, like, things that I wouldn't, as in, I promised myself I would never put myself in that position again. As like, the vulnerability is scary because people will eat you. I'd seen them, I'd been eating myself. Oh yes, it was just to King's College. We're playing a game. And I just came to King's College in Form 2. And I thought, okay, let me just join with these guys, let me try and bond with them. And I didn't know I was being set up. So essentially the game was a case of either if someone put his hand out, the other touch the same side of the hand. If the back is open, put the back there. If the What they didn't tell me is that anybody can switch. So someone just switched, and I just felt hand beating my back like in a rush or like in a ring, and that brought out a beast in me, and I had to pull it back. Because I remember I roared, and then everybody jumped back. But if you know boys, teenager boys, it takes something for them to jump back, especially if they are doing mischief. I roared, and I stood up, and they jumped back, and I just walked out of the class. And I told myself, there are things that I will never subject myself to, and I'll never do it.
So you've hit on something really, really interesting, which is that aspect of vulnerability. Now, culturally, here, in the culture that we're at, vulnerability is associated with femininity. Right?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
You are being put in a position where you know your diagnosis, but you want to get an official written document. It will help you.
Yeah.
There are reasons why you want to do it. But here, because you hear on the broad, well, Chris Rock just got his diagnosis last year.
Really?
Yeah. So there are adults who have realized that they may be on the spectrum and go and seek help. Yeah. But here we're still dealing with a system that is only really diagnosing children, right?
Oh.
And putting questions to a grown man like yourself who's 44, that really if they read through that, anybody with common sense would say, these are not really the appropriate questions for this stage in a person's life. You still went through it. You still put yourself through it. How do you reconcile that? Do you reconcile it?
The thing that I've come to accept is that until it's actually an interest in the medical field, nobody cares. So I don't hold a torch for help here. If I get the right help, fine.
Use your mic. Use your mic.
I want to just interesting. I think we miss a lot of early intervention. When people talk about early intervention, now I really understand it quite. Because when you're talking, I remember. So again, when I was at Emory with my son, the guy who was Professor Mori, I think his name was Michael Mori. He's a professor of behavioral, whatever, 17,000 degrees, and he's an autistic guy, right? So he's the one that's on the phone, right? And while he was doing that, he started asking me all these questions. about my childhood. And as he was talking, I just realized that, hey, I could have been my son at a young age, because a lot of things that happened to me growing up began to make sense. You know, and there's several things that it was called when I was young. You know, how I started, I stammered, right? And it was very bad when I was young. Like, once there was one person in the room, sometimes I couldn't speak with one person. Like, it took me years of, and I'm a sales guy, you see, which is quite funny. I'd be like, when I heard that you were like a director of animation, I was like, this is weird, right? We are doing jobs that have to do with sort of people. But when I was young, I couldn't stand to have people in the room. I couldn't talk. And then that came with a very serious temper. Like, my temper was legendary. I was like in fights, like my body is full of scars from fights. I mean, my temper is really bad, right? It was, because now my wife can tell you I'm changed, honestly. But then my mom was someone who was a special teacher, but she always used to tell me, hey, look, you know, you just have this temper that you have to manage. You just have this. And then I was, you know, I wouldn't play with my peers. I spent most of my time reading. So I mean, sometimes when my wife met me, there's a time that I hadn't left my house in 3 months, a year. Like there's a time when I was in a particular space in my house for 1 year, right? My hair grew out, I had a big beard, and I thought it was normal, but other people didn't, right? So I'm sort of like a weird guy. And as I got older, I was able to find methods to function, but you know, those who are close to me know that I've also struggled to just make friends or just be understood. Like I'm, you know, like even now people still find me quite forced when I'm, you know, I hear comments. You know, one of my neighbors is here, like I'm a big, you know, Paul is very blunt, Paul is very direct, Paul, you know, I always get these things that make it seem as if I'm some kind of difficult guy to get along with, which I really am not, right? So I feel that if I had had some early intervention when I was young, because it's a little late, and I think I appreciate what you were saying, it's a little late now to start asking some questions. Like, it's over. Like, I mean, that period when I was young, when I was able to be vulnerable, I think I've lost that part of my life where, you know, there's a age, there's different levels of vulnerability that you can accept in age. Like, when you are younger, you're more trusting, so you go to your mom, even after she beats you, right? That kind of thing. But as you grow older, you begin to get a little more set. So I really feel for people who are adults struggling with autism, who haven't had that early, because in many cases it's too late to pull back the clock on some particular thing, and you just have to live with it. I don't know if you know what I'm saying.
There's an older colleague, an older friend of mine, much older, who he was the first person I actually opened up to. This was about 10 years ago. As I was telling him about, you know, I've been reading psychology books. I'm trying to figure out what things were. Like, I don't really. I then explained the thought process to him and how I put the thought process and how he then started laughing. And you're like, you're psychoanalyzing yourself. I'm like, what? Yeah, you're trying to measure. You're actively measuring your response, your interpretation. People don't really do that. We don't think it through. We just. The thing for me is that I had actually seen people who, let me just answer one last question. When it comes to vulnerability, there is already violence in me. It's ready.
None of us here.
It's ready, but I had to culture it. I had to culture it, and it's not so much physical violence. My mouth can be very sharp. I've blunted it over the years. My mouth really, I can leave some people sober, you know. But the thing is that I'd come across, well, we can identify each other.
Right, there's once you
As once we're in the room, we just yeah. And it's not just, and I will, no, we just, okay. You know, and we tend to feel very safe.
Around
Once you know that one or two
Because you get it, right? Because they
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, you know that no matter what happens, they will understand where you're coming from. They'll understand what.
So, two things. There's two things that I picked. You also mentioned it was the lack of, should we just be nice and say lack of understanding from the medical arena?
I think you're being too nice.
I'm being very
Let me
nice.
see. You know, the first time I came to the Special Moms podcast, I was talking about kids that they removed from circulation because they were too vulnerable. You know, there's a way you're supposed to behave, and in fact, that is even what led to my strength in voice directing. There's a way that you're supposed to sound, and if you don't sound that way,
But there's a way that you're meant to be, right? So I've had several stories from mothers in that they were at the doctors getting the diagnosis. They're there with the other half. The other half was present. And the medical personnel say to the dad, oh, don't worry, it's not your problem. But you're there with your other half. Or, you know, another story is that the dad took it hard. No, nothing crying. It's the mother-in-law.
Nigerian way.
You know, so
Yeah. But even because Nigeria doesn't work, the system doesn't work. You and I go to hospitals like Lagoon and what, because we rather not do the general hospitals. In general hospitals, even when you are giving birth to your child, the dad is cut off from that process. He's asked to stay out, he's asked to go away. So, it then isn't, what do you call it, strange that you're having to check your child to have an issue and they're making it like is a more.
So what I find funny, right, is that it's a serious matter, but I assume that it's the mom's burden. Is that what it means, that they assume it's mom's burden?
Yeah.
All the dad's
Because
burden?
it falls down into certain things that a woman should do or not do.
I get about doing, right, but how about feeling? Are they thinking that, traditionally men don't really feel love their kids, only moms that love their
Yeah,
kids?
because so also over the years, the way you are with
I have
family,
a list
you
of
wouldn't
like
have found
people
a
that
lot
I
of
met
fathers like that. I
through
didn't come
primary
down
school,
with my dad.
secondary school,
It
university.
was a case of you hear your dad. A few people during our dad's time
I
had
got
that,
the
but I
vibe
want to believe
from-
that most of those parents were a little bit
But I
exposed
didn't know how to help them.
or something.
Sorry, please.
I didn't know how to help them. There will be times you recognize that it is social bullying. But you know,
So this kind of attitude is a form of social bullying.
you know, as like you see actual active social bullying. They will ask a question that they will ask. Their way to frame a question that either way, if you don't have that violence in you, to just walk away. You are just trying to be polite, but there's no good answer. You still look like an idiot, you know. And
Because the stereotype is, right, so I come from the moms, and it's a Special Moms Africa podcast, because I'm a mom, that's how I got into it. That child had diagnosis, I was able to build a community, find people to talk to. But the constant theme or constant question is like, your husband is still there. He didn't go away. That the men don't stay.
Yeah, that's not fair, first of all. So there's a few concepts that I want to learn. The first one, I think we mentioned about medical. Again, I said, I think you're being too kind. I think there's a difference between not having an interest and being totally incompetent, which I find is the case in Nigeria. And I'm just going to be honest, like, we don't have any
Totally incompetent.
competence in that area. And that could be a direct result of the cultural issue, but I don't think that's an excuse. Even at the very, so listen, we hardly even have healthcare people who are normal, right? That's already a problem, day one, before you start talking about people who have special needs. So let's be realistic. My son doesn't have a one doctor who he sees. We don't have a family doctor who understands autism. Every time we go to the place, because what's autism like? There's a time when my kid I went to this new hospital in Lekki. It was supposed to be all this new shiny place that they just built. I can't remember the name. Evercare. And they're like, oh, so my son was having a bit of an episode, because my son also has epilepsy as well. So autism and epilepsy, and once in a while he'll have a seizure, which you manage with drugs, and then those drugs now cause weight gain. It's a whole thing. And we went there and we were kept in the lobby for an hour. It was until I started making noise, and then even when I started making noise, it wasn't really a thing. They were like, oh, this guy just making noise. But then when they realized, oh, this guy knows celebrities, then all of a sudden somebody was, Mr. Paul, and I'm like, fuck off.
It's okay. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast. So I'm like, fuck off, and I went back there again. So that's one thing that we need to that's a whole new podcast that we're going to address that issue. Right? Someone needs to even one doctor or two doctors who are actually, but they feel to be fair, who are actually going to sort out the medical side, because there's a medical side to autism that we have to look at, the actual medical part, before we start talking about the behavioral stuff. So that's the first thing I'll say. Yeah, so the second thing I'll say is, I think it's very, men and women are different. We have to make that clear. Men and women are different. These days, if you go online, they will tell you it's not so, but
another podcast.
Men and women are different, right? And we respond differently to different situations, right? We have different ways of assimilating information, different way of sort of organizing it in our heads, a different way of now executing an action plan. And the perception that men are, I would say the men are even more afraid. Like, if you look at it from a cultural point of view, when a father gets a diagnosis about his son, especially if it's a son, or it's even worse if it's a daughter. Like, it's my son for me. If it was my daughter, I don't know what I would do. I would be distraught. You know what I mean? Because it's my daughter, right? But because men socially are not expected to break down. When you're in that hospital and the doctor tells you the news, and you start crying there, they'll say, what kind of olodo is this? Like, can you hold yourself together? So that immediate reaction, I think the women are more fortunate because they're able to express and emote, and it's normal, and people sort of help them and comfort them, and madam, we're so sorry. Like, they have that, they are fortunate in that sense. For me, when I'm in a public place and sometimes your son is autistic and I start crying, they'll be like, that family is in trouble, that guy's not going to be able to sort this thing out, it's going to be, so I think it's a little bit, we have to look at it differently. However, women will flurry. They will flurry, right? It's what they're built for. They're nurturing, they sort of nurture, and they're automatically designed to care more about people, while men care more about things, right? So, women will flurry, they'll run around, they'll start, putting things together, they'll go here, go there. Men are more likely to say, for example, when I got my son's diagnosis, the thing in my head was, how do I change the house so the house is a safe space? I'm thinking about all the sharp corners that are in the house, blunting them, and buying all these equipment from IKEA, removing electrical things, covering, because now that the boy has autism, I'm thinking about physical safety. That's the way my mind is going. My wife was more like, let's get the food, let's get the therapy. She's more, so that's why it's a team, because I'll share a story with you guys. I was at a conference in Berlin or something one time, and when I was leaving the house, I told my wife, hey, there's a crack on the floor. There's a little bit of the tile had broken, and there's a little bit of a sharp edge. And I said, hey, Buzi, that's my wife's nickname. Nobody's called her Buzi. I said, hey, Buzi, there's this crack on the floor. Call this guy to take care of it today, because something could go wrong. I said, okay, I'll do it. I traveled. Bro, while I was in the conference, my wife told me, problem, sent me a picture, right? My son had fallen, just like I said, he'd fallen on that thing and cut his knee open from here to here. Like, his knee was like gaping, right? And when she sent me the picture, I lost my entire mind. Like, I lost my mind. I told the guys, I have to leave. I can't stay at this conference. I canceled the conference. I booked the flight that night and then started flying back to Nigeria. While I was flying back, they were in the hospital, trying to get the boy. The boy doesn't feel pain like that. He needs to, they're sewing up the guy's leg. So but when I got back, I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, see, what the hell? Like, I said this would happen, but then I can't be angry because the things that she's worried about are also very important. Like the things that she's worried about. So if you get into that whole game of what's the mom doing or what's the dad doing, it's always going to cause conflict. They are both equally important. They both serve a specific purpose. I think men should do what men do best and figure out how to fix the things. But imagine single moms who are going through this. It's hell. Like we had a friend. So my wife has one of these friends who called her. There's the lady who got married and had a kid. The kid is autistic, and the guy leaves. Right? Remember, the guy just leaves, and she's come back to Nigeria just for her and this boy, and it's hell. Like, it's hell because she can't figure out the thing inside of it. She can be there for her son, but she can't figure out the things, moving the couch. These are all important things. So I think I just wanted to say that, we should approach that with balance because men and women are different and perform different functions.
So approach with balance. Obina.
Yeah, so I mean, just to sort of touch on what the gentleman was saying, I think that the cultural side of things plays a very, very key role in, first of all, not allowing people face the problem. Like, what am I saying? People who are from lower economic spectrums or society, there are lots of kids that have these problems, autism, name it, Down syndrome, and they just, like you said, they put them out of circulation. They just, like, I remember growing up, going to some people's houses and you thought, okay, there are only 3 kids, I only see 3 kids. And you go in and see there's just one.
Yeah.
They saw it a lot.
Completely
They chain on the bed.
And they chain.
Yeah. You see a family where the girl was chained in the back. When we came to the house, they would tie her to so people didn't see that they had a child.
And the funny thing is, this particular one was, I was working like my first job, so I was working in an agency and I went to see one of my bosses, and going into the house and there was this girl, very big, in terms of size, and you could tell that all was not well and she never came out of the house. So you find that it's only people who I think for economic reasons who have the capital and the wherewithal to actually try and find a solution. So until we sort of, and that's why we are talking about, finding the right expertise from a medical point of view and also educating people about, okay, this is not death sentence. Okay, yes, it's a bit of a challenge, but you can manage it. So I think that that's a real mountain to climb from a cultural perspective. And then you touched on something that's really important. It's teamwork between the mother and the father. Like, we decided that for Jason, he's going to be 9. We said we would not take him to any specialist school, but the funny thing is, like I said, you have to really look well to notice that anything is wrong. But even though he has a little bit of delayed speech and stuff like that, but we said we would integrate him with regular for kids, and we're not going to make it look as if he's anything special, And it's worked, Yes, he's had to maybe review 1 or 2 classes, but he's catching on. He can express himself. He can talk. He understands back. He's the most willing to help in the house. We come back, everybody rushes out. I have 4 sons anyway, so he rushes out.
4 sons.
Yeah. The last 2 are twins, so it's a bit of a shocker when I say that. So he's always willing to help. He comes out. He's the one who wants to carry the stuff you brought back from work and stuff like that. So I'm just happy that he's well integrated, but we have to be deliberate about it and say, we're not going to keep this kid. He's not going to be in somewhere. He's going to go to school with his brother. He's going to do subjects like everybody else, learn math, learn English, and all that stuff. And that's how it's worked for us. Sport. I bet he plays. He's a goalkeeper. He likes to goalkeep. So we play football.
We've had some really good nuggets. You have to be deliberate about it, approach with balance. Sons judge their fathers till they understand them. Like, some great nuggets. But there's still madness going on out there, right? Even I hear weird things, So you're still getting the thing. It's like, okay, is the wife, maybe you should get another wife.
Yeah.
That someone did a curse on you.
They don't want that child in church. And you may think this is only limited to a certain socioeconomic class. It isn't.
Cuts across.
I mean, I can tell you myself it isn't. how, you know, do you deal with that?
Yeah, what I'll say is,
Because they'll tell you to go and find another wife,
yeah,
or that's your wife.
So
It's a problem.
let me start by saying this. When you are making a vow, it's for better, for worse. And the worst may not necessarily be about what happens to you, what happens to your offspring. And the truth is, this is the bitter truth. You know, that is what loving somebody is about at the end of the day. So if the adversity comes, and that's why I tell people when people are about to get married, I say to them, this phase is great, right? This is, you know, when everything is flowery, it's great, you know, you're in a good place, you're dating and all that, you want to get married, you know, but once you cross that Rubicon, once you cross that line, you're married now, you face the reality of life, that is when the relationship starts. That's when, and part of it is, let's have a look, your challenges may not start immediately, but it could start when you have a kid. You have a kid and you have problems. That is what it's about.
Yep.
So in the first place, if anybody leaves, you know, like the example Paul gave, like somebody, you know, had a child with autistic, and then there was never love in the first place. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. And I also understand that people, you know, people grow, you know, and so things happen as you develop. But at the end of the day, it's about facing challenges. It's about dealing with problems. That is what a relationship is about at the end of the day, you know. So if you up and leave, you know, I mean, I gave my first, this is my first child, you know, like how do you recover from that? But then again, you remember why you're together in a union. You understand that at the end of the day, it's about having each other's backs. It's about solving this problem, you know.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's very easy to blame that special child for the breakup of a marriage, a breakup of a relationship.
Yeah.
When it's actually the relationship had its problem, and it's
exactly.
just that highlighted
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
so that's not
part.
opened up the real, taking up the veil, if you like, yeah.
So, you know, for men, you've got to deal with keeping the family together. You've got to deal with prejudice outside. You've got to deal with the culture of what it is to be a man, and you're going through this. I mean, I know it was difficult for my husband. How do we help men find their voice? How do we say it's safe, it's okay to talk? What can be done? I'm just going to throw it out there. Not hard questions.
I think I'm already doing my own part.
What's your part? Tell us. What's your part? Tell us.
You know, the thing is, there are many people my age who are hiding.
Yeah.
As in, they are hiding. And I think I must have been like 37 when I realized, come to my house, come and beat me. I was like, that was, look, I am who I am, I do what I do it well. This is how I understand. I'm going to try and find out what exactly it is. Then it was, interestingly enough, a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist. We've been friends for about 10 years now. I didn't realize he was studying me. I just knew that whenever we talked, whenever I'd say something, whenever I expressed myself, he didn't have that. I'm sorry if you're neurotypical. There's usually first there's a reaction when I'm not speaking as myself. I see that thing flash, but he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't have it. He was the one who I just came for a look. I started reading about autism, and what do you think? And I said, my professional opinion, it's Asperger's. You know, that if people are not close to you, they will think that you are, they'll think what they think. I started sharing this with people because I didn't care what the impressions were. Like, I started sharing it with people. At the last GT Autism conference, one of my friends who I had been telling, I think you need to, was like, what was it? As in, he'd have panic attack. As like, it was like a huge collection of things. I saw him at the conference with his wife. This is somebody that does not come out.
As well.
Yes, you know, was it? Yes.
He was there.
Yeah. I saw him. And he's somewhat difficult to pull out of the house.
And he was there.
He was there. And I think the conversations that were held that day opened a lot for him. Because I tried to catch up with him to see how are you doing, it's been a while. He didn't want to have a conversation. It was like there was a lot that was suddenly on it. So his wife kind of gave me a signal that, you know what, maybe later it's not really in a good place. I said, sure, I understand. The thing is that nobody's going to beat you. No, nobody's going to beat you. No, regardless, the thing is that the more people look for help, the more people identify these things and step out, regardless of, I'd give you the gist of my family reactions, but that was just, no. I was like, I want to put a stain on the family, what will people look at? I don't care. As in, I don't care. I've been managing this stuff myself. I've been wearing masks around you guys for almost 4 decades. Because I don't want to, I see mommy is tired. I don't want mommy to be exhausted. I see daddy is on the edge. I don't want to be the one to tip him over. You know, as in like, it was weird. It was almost like being a parent.
So someone of you, like you know, your answer is that you just have to speak up. You have to find your
Just speak up. And the thing is that the more people
do,
that come out,
the more people will feel comfortable.
and the medical, oh snap, what's the word again? There's a polite word for it.
Personnel. People.
The medical field in Nigeria, the community, will actually recognize it for what it actually is. It's not, oh my God, it's a recent phenomenon. Look,
It's always been
the man who asked
But
them,
if you don't see anybody that is speaking up, right? As a dad, you have this child who is different, and you don't have anyone around you with a similar case. So you know, what do you do?
So, so my dad is late, very smart guy, my dad, and there's something that he tell me, well, Paul, he tell me, the less you say, the less you have to account for, right? And that thing, it was drummed in my head, like the less you say, the less you have to account for, and it's true, because I apply that principle in business today. Like when I'm doing something, I know when to keep things to my chest, depending on the impact that will get. Sometimes you don't share business ideas until it's known. You know, sometimes you share, sometimes you don't. So you have to sort of manage how you share based on the outcomes that you expect from that thing. If I bring it here, and the way I sort of came into this thing is that I've always been very specific around the things that I want to do, around how I want my family to be, around who I want to be. So even with going back to what you were saying with my wife, marriage is very hard tonight. I mean, we know this. Actually, that's how you recognize the good ones. Because it's so hard that the good ones sort of stick out. You can tell when people are in sync, right? When I got married, my wife and I are such good friends. We fight every day. Like, I don't remember a day where we don't fight. In fact, we fought this morning 3 times on our way here. Good time. And I still haven't forgiven her yet. My family, I made it clear to my family what my family was. You know, there are times when my parents would come, I made it clear to them that this is my family. My wife and I and these kids are my family. They are the first thing. Your opinion is not really required. Like, I think my family is very clear on that. Like, we appreciate it. You know, if you give an opinion, we're not going to chase you away, but ultimately, your opinion is not required, right? So I'll like to start with that. Then, in terms of that decision to make people aware, for me, it was, you know, if you're fortunate, how do I say this? If you're fortunate and you're driving awareness without asking for something, people are more likely to listen. Have you noticed that? So and that's what scares men. If you say, oh, my kid has autism and I'm doing awareness, and they say that, oh, you're a well-to-do guy, you have some means, and you're not really asking them for anything, you're not asking them for money or anything, they're more likely to listen, sit down and listen, right? And because guys don't like that pity, I hate it personally, that whole pity part of them. Oh, you're so nice, autism, oh, you're so, oh, yes, no. So that's for me, right? I'm not judging people who do, because pity, compassion is very important in everything that we do. We must find a way to be compassionate, right? But I found that sharing to people without saying, hey, look, I want something from you was the key. Because the minute I start saying, oh, come and help us with money, come and help us with it, I said, look, this is your problem because I have problems on my own. So for me, awareness was trying to put the information out there, right, in a neutral manner, without putting any sort of contingencies or responsibilities on the person who I was sharing with. So they were able to receive the information very, very simply. I'll tell you something. I had a colleague. I hope this thing doesn't go. Does this podcast worldwide?
It will be, so you don't have to say names.
So, I had a colleague who was a friend for
a long time.
14 years. We had worked in the same company for a long time, and we were together. His desk was right next to mine, and he has 2 kids on the spectrum. In fact, one on the spectrum, one who is a bit more. And he never told me, and this is after I've been talking about autism for 5, 6, 7 years. He never ever told me. And one day I found out, and I was like, yo, we're brothers, right? This doesn't make any sense. But people are different, right? For him, he's really the kind of guy that doesn't want anyone to pity him at all. He doesn't want people to say, oh, poor you, or he's very like that. But then on the other side, I have friends who call me and say, Paul, thank you so much. I don't really think I do much. I just repost. You're on my Instagram, you see that I'm very heavy on autism information. And I have to be like, Paul, thank you so much. You really, your page is where I learned stuff that I learned about autism and so on and so forth. So those are the calls that I really appreciate. Now I have friends who call me and say, hey Paul, I have this friend who has a son or daughter autistic. Can you talk to them? And I always say, look, I can help them with some moral, but you have to talk to my wife. I would say you have to talk to my wife because she is the one who is baked in this thing. So I guess the point I'm making is that I'm a firm believer in balance and in outcomes. I don't stick to one position. I like to be a little bit balanced in the way I look at some. If you take me to Kano right now and put me on this panel in Kano, right, I have to factor in the fact that I am in Kano. And things sort of work differently there than they do here, right? Same thing if you send me to Umuahia, for example. I'm not going to say, oh, your boys are autistic and this. They'll be like, are you crazy? So you also have to read the room, right? Understand where you are, and then find, in the marketing, we say align with the consumer pathway. You know how we say that in marketing, right? So what's the best way to make this thing palatable for these people?
For the receiver.
Yeah, but final thing, you must do it. I think you must do it because there are people who need it. We don't even know. This is a deep problem. There are many people with autism in Nigeria, many. Now that I know what it is, I recognize it now that there are many. So we must continue to have these conversations. Sorry.
No, do not apologize. The nuggets that are coming out here today, I'm loving them. So we want to put this out to the audience here and see if you guys have any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Don't be shy.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Everything you said makes sense to me. I'm today years old, realizing what my dad was doing. I'm 38. I didn't get my ADHD diagnosis until last year.
Wow.
And I guess my dad always knew that I was different. And everything he said of how the dad is the one watching and seeing what you do. He was the one who knew I would space out and just go, and they would call me harebrained because I would forget your name. Your name was Paul. If you ask me again, I promise you, I honestly do not remember. My husband struggled with, I told you, and I'm like, I promise you, it's not deliberate, I do not remember. You know, and so he was the one who was seeing what I was lacking, and for me when he said, well, how do they cope? Was he found out I love books. And so he would have conversations about books, and he knew how my stutter was very hard. So he was one who picked all those signs of, I just know she's different. And so I thought my dad was favoring me. I didn't know he had seen, he had saw and he understood. So what I'm going to say is, how do we communicate to them to your wives? Or to part men to their wives that, you know what, I'm just seeing this differently. My husband now, I told him that I'm seeing this now. So he's like, my daughter now, I don't think she's on the spectrum, but what happens is when she's upset, she just goes and hits her head on the wall. That's the only symptom. I'm like, that's what? So she would just tell you, I don't like him, and she would go and hit her head on the wall. That's all she does. So I'm like, so how do men tell, like, I'm learning to that, it's not like they don't see it, they're just perceiving it different. So how do you come to get what? We are on the same team. I didn't see that fixing part. I promise you, it never occurred. But yes, I'm nurturing your fixing. It makes sense now. You get, so how do men tell their wives that, guess what? We're on the same team. I see what you're saying, and I'm fixing it the way I can. That's
a very good question. It's one of those things that you call pregnant questions.
Yeah.
Very comfortable. Well, and so what's your name, sorry? Momola. So nice to meet you, and I love your story because it reminds me of my dad. My dad used to do this, my popsy used to do this thing where he knew that I needed to read more because I wouldn't play. So my popsy would tell me, go and read Isaiah chapter 40 and come, let's talk about it. Or he'd tell me, so my dad knew that the way to get to me was through books. I read so many books, when I was young, it was ridiculous, but as I grew older, I understood that that was his way of bonding with me, and controlling my temper, and my mom would be like, so when I was 8 or 9, he gave me this War and Peace. He said, Tolstoy.
Wow.
And I mean, my neighbor Femi, knows about my thing with books. So and his friend was like, what 8-year-old, 9-year-old reads fucking Tolstoy? Because it's very tedious, right, to read. Even for an adult, it's quite tedious. But I took to it, like I would read it, and what's the next one? So, I mean, obviously you had a great dad who in his own way, tried to. It's difficult. It's quite difficult to communicate that to your partner. My wife and I have constant disagreements about how to do things. That's the truth. Like, I'm not going to come here and lie on the podcast. We have constant disagreements on how to do things. Because again, I'm more focused on the thing and how it works from here to there. She's more interested in the people. Sometimes I think what I've now understood is that sometimes what she's doing is more important. Sometimes what I'm doing is more important. And it's finding that balance. But one way that I fixed it was that I realized that whatever she's doing requires things. Are you following me? If my wife says, for example, she'll do something where she's going to be vocational for kids with autism, like focusing on vocation, because my son, that's what we did with my son. We just went to art, music, and she says, I think this would be a good idea. My thought would be that what are the things in that idea that need to be done? So when I'm talking to her about And I did it. She already had that. I'm just trying to help. If not, we would always disagree on something. So like, my son needs to swim. Swimming is a big part of who he is, right? And for a long time, we didn't have a pool, you know. And, I was like, pool. You guys in the estate fix our pool so we can swim. And I didn't go and instead of me to just start taking him to, there are pools all around us. I could have just taken him to the pool to swim. I didn't. And then one day, we were in the house on Saturday. I was reading, and I didn't hear a noise. No, this is when he wakes up. He makes all these noises. The house was quiet. I was like, "Where is Ziza?" And they were like, "I thought he was with you. He's not with me." And then he was missing for like 6 hours or something. We were looking for him. He had left our house, walked to the fence, climbed the fence. We lived near the ocean, near, I don't know what our beach is called. Elegushi. We live right on Elegushi beach. He jumped the fence and jumped into the ocean and was swimming, right? Just by the grace of God, there was a guy, it's early in the morning, like 7 a.m., there was a guy who was walking his horse. You know these horse guys, that red horses on the beach, and he saw the boy in the ocean and went in and got him out. And that day he would have died, and I mean, it's ocean, we never have seen him again. When they found him, when he came back to the house, and I went to my room, I said, "Paul, man, you really fucked up." Because while everybody else was saying, "Oh, his back was kind," I was like, in my head, I was like, why is it that this boy left the house, climbed the fence, and went to this thing? And is this going to stop? Because he'll do it again. Because the thing is that he needs to swim. My wife was like, "Oh, no, she was somewhere else. Oh, we need to be more careful with the doors," and she was somewhere else, which was not the wrong place to be. But for me, my head was like, if we don't find a pool very, very, very soon, this boy will continue to jump this fence until one day he dies in that ocean. And so what I did was, I poured myself into making the people whose job it was to make that pool a living hell. I was on their neck. Mr. Femi is my neighbor, right? I was on their neck, literally until that pool was ready. And when the pool was ready, the behavior stopped, right? But so, my wife and I were working towards the same thing, but we were doing it differently. But I've also learned from your question, I think I'll try better. I think I'll even have to do better to try and explain to my wife what I'm thinking and how I'm thinking. Maybe it will help us. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, this is
Okay, literally.